Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever TAI podcast, TAI 2022, our first face-to-face event since the start of the pandemic. And we've got a lot of discussion going on for you. Later we'll be joined by some speakers at TAI, Paul Everall on building safety, and Emma Jardine on an interesting project in Edinburgh about providing books for homeless people and addressing that sort of dehumanisation aspect of homelessness that occurs, and just getting them to feel good about themselves again. So some interesting stuff. I'm joined live at the conference by our resident policy experts at CIH in Wales. It's Matt Kennedy, our policy and public affairs manager in Wales, and Kath May, our TAI Cymru project manager, which is the big research project that's delivered lots of research over the last 5 years, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of that. But guys, I suppose the context that we're meeting is probably the biggest thing that's been there throughout the last couple of days at TAI, isn't it? What are those big ticket issues that the sector are facing?
I think for me it's around complexity. So, we spoke about before the cost of living crisis. Poverty was already well entrenched with some of the communities our members work in. That's only become worse. We layer that over with some of the stuff we spoke about with the economy yesterday with Professor Jardine. Inflation rising, cost of living going up even further before the end of the year, hitting people on lower incomes even harder. That's only going to make kind of the work of the sector even more vital. 20,000 low carbon social housing target, need to retrofit homes, increase safety, the cross tenure element. That's like an incredible amount of stuff for professionals to try and kind of grapple with. Lot of competing priorities within that. We speak about the high level strategy, but lots of our members talking about, well, how do we get to know tenants again? How do we get to know kind of on the ground grassroots stuff that feed in our kind of overall strategic approach to making things happen?
Yeah, because it's one of probably the toughest operational environments that we're going to face in our lifetime. I mean, there are not many people older than me at the conference, and it's certainly the toughest I've ever seen. So what's the sort of mood that you felt at the conference, Kath, in terms of, is everyone up for the battle?
Yeah, I think that's right, Matt. It is a really difficult time. But what's perhaps really come through is kind of echoing what Matt Kennedy was saying, was about that need to really engage with people again to understand what the issues are for them. And too often, lots of our conversations do happen at the kind of high end of the debate. But actually, what we've done at TAI is actually hear from lots of people who've got other experiences and are able to kind of talk about the work they've done with their communities, whether that's decarbonising, retrofitting, or looking to improve kind of community relations during the pandemic, and the lessons that we've had from that, the work that local government's done to really try and make sure we're supporting communities through this really difficult time. So I think one of the most important things is making sure we've learned that we embed that learning. We don't just kind of jump into the next crisis and expect to start all over from scratch. We've learned a lot, and we just need to keep learning.
So just to clarify, Kath has applied to DPOL to change her name to Matt, because obviously you need to be called Matt to comment on policy at CIH Wales. But no, that's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, the collaboration that's happened during the pandemic, I mean, we as a sector should be proud of that. I mean, you make a very good point. How do we ensure that collaboration and that innovation, continues? I mean, big part of that process is events like TAI, and our new membership offer, providing, that home for that debate to take place.
Yeah, you're right, Matt, but also collaboration needs to happen kind of out there with other sectors as well, and so making sure that we're continuing to work with the health sector, with the social care sectors, that housing is getting that seat at the table amongst all those other sectors as well. Not going back to pre-pandemic kind of silo working is a really important part of the jigsaw.
I think what we have kind of seen is trying to figure out how we reframe some of that stuff as well, isn't it? We speak about collaboration, how good that's been, but if you look at the Housing Futures Cymru work we launched, when was it, yesterday, about tenant-facing members of staff, what they're feeling is delays to social care referrals. They're then seeing situations get worse. So even though that collaboration might be there in strategy and writing, on the ground we're feeling acutely the pressures on other services. And we speak about a lot, don't we? The amount of government block grant, the funding the government goes into the NHIC, goes into social care. How can we begin to switch the narrative more towards housing? At the housing quality session this morning, We spoke about how do you feel about quality? What does it mean to you? It isn't about necessarily your heat loss in your home. How safe do you feel? How happy do you feel in your home? All these kind of more kind of emotional feelings we have to our housing situation are being elevated in importance, aren't they? And that needs to cut across kind of how we collaborate and how we think.
Good afternoon.
Well, as you can hear, we are literally live at the TAI conference. So one of the sessions is just about to start. So apologies for that. But yeah, I think you're right, Matt, isn't it? For me, and it was sort of exposed in the session on the report that we published today on net zero skills. Are we assured at the moment that we're even asking the right questions in the first place to get the answers we need to meet those challenges? So particularly on skills, there was a big debate about, one person in the audience asked a question, well, where do we start? So are we starting to get there and answering that? And it kind of ties into your point, Kath, about that collaborative approach, and that, it's still not there in terms of drawing on everyone's experience to make sure we get to a place where we're starting that process.
Yeah, there's loads of interconnectedness, isn't there, between stuff in this programme, but either by chance or on purpose. When we think about the skills stuff, I think about the cost of living crisis, the challenge facing tenants, the need to think, well, how does that drive towards green skills benefit populations that our members serve? Opportunities for retraining, apprenticeships, money within local economies. That if we go ahead and we do all this good stuff to our housing without increasing productivity, is what we spoke about yesterday in the economy session. How do we make meaningful jobs that create productivity for the economy? That is where the real crux of the issue is. All that's really connected. We had Chris Yao this morning from Lloyds Bank talking about ESG, for environmental, social governance, finance. I'd never considered how homelessness provision could add to that. He was saying, well, actually, all the stuff the sector does around homelessness, increasing employment, will attract investment. We don't always make the connection between what we might deem to be maybe the softer social purpose type services having a really big impact on attracting capital investment. All this stuff is really strongly linked.
So are we still stuck in the old way of doing things then? Has that sea change, that paradigm shift not happened yet?
Well, I was going to say the session that really stood out for me was around the equality, diversity and inclusion, and it not being just a KPI, and the speakers from Welsh Government and Welsh Water really kind of challenging the audience to think about how they deliver their work, who's involved in their work, and the changes that still need to happen so that we have better representation across the board for staff, for committee members, for boards, and generally about the benefits that brings and how we work with communities. And I think that's an example of where actually sea change is happening, and we have to keep challenging ourselves and learning from those organisations who are doing it well. And it's great to see them kind of having the opportunity to share that with the housing sector.
Yeah, that session was another good example, isn't it, about again how we think about housing. Is our housing culturally appropriate? When we did our right sizing work, looking at tenants in North Wales, asking them what things really matter to you, and it's come out in Welsh Government's own work around the pandemic and that sort of stuff, and focus on the fact that lots of families overcrowd, because some cultures it's more traditional to live between different generations and look after older generations, for example, but our housing simply often doesn't accommodate it. So when you think about how many homes out there are 5-6 bedroom properties, few and far between. And the waiting list for homes of that size, probably a matter of years. So how do we become more, I guess, culturally linked into our local communities, so we're building the right kind of homes? Because we speak about the right homes, but often they're not necessarily catered to people's kind of, religious beliefs, cultural beliefs and so on, things we really should and rightly value.
So that's interesting. I think always interesting to explore things from a counterfactual perspective. So what wasn't discussed at TAI? We can't get the programme exactly right, but it wasn't far off, a lot of people told me. But what wasn't discussed that perhaps we needed to drill down on, in order to meet those ambitions that we've been talking about?
I think it's a difficult question, isn't it? And I'm trying to work out how to word it kind of tactfully with the person who set the programme, but definitely something around, the kind of role that housing plays in keeping people well and healthy during a pandemic. I think, we have to keep shouting about that, about the amazing work that was done by the staff in housing associations, in local government. They tell us in the CIH Cymru project that they are feeling pretty burnout after 2 years of working consistently at such high levels in such difficult circumstances to keep people well and healthy. And now we're going into a new crisis. People are opening their homes to people from Ukraine. That's an amazing place for us to be. But the impact that will have on local government staff having to suddenly take on this huge new challenge will continue. And I think there's a real space to make sure that we are really highlighting the great work that's been done and kind of celebrating that as well. And for me, I can't say enough how much I think we should be doing that at every opportunity and not kind of putting it behind us as what's done is done.
No, and I think that's kind of linked to the professionalism agenda, isn't it? That perhaps lack of recognition that we were talking about on the first day about the contribution that housing professionals make. Or not the lack of understanding the contribution, but they don't recognise them as housing professionals. And making that link to understand, well, actually, it is the housing professional that's doing it. So, same question to you, Matt. Anything that you think we could...
Well, I think the programme was brilliant. The people who put it together should be celebrated. If you look at things like private renting, it's really obvious areas, and home ownership. We largely represent kind of social and affordable housing providers, and mixed in lots of our members do student housing, private housing for sale, that sort of stuff. Understandably, we don't focus really heavily on the PRS, but we know 17% of the housing stock of Wales, owned by private landlords, face huge challenges around upgrading their properties, and are still going to need to do both continue to do what they do now, but also much more to alleviate homelessness. And then, of course, we know homeowners. When we think about what it must mean to upgrade your home personally, both investing, having the money there in the midst of a cost of living crisis, that's really tricky. I try to think ahead, what's going to happen next year. We're going to go away now, even though it feels ages away, and think, well, what will TAI 2023 hold? What for you guys are going to be the next big ticket items on the agenda?
Okay, I was going to quickly ask, what position would you hope we'll be in by TAI 2023? Very, very quickly.
I would hope we'd be in a position where we have the Health Minister agreeing to invest heavily in housing across Wales.
Matt?
Yeah, I think it's more we'll have less unanswered questions. There's too many, I guess we had Welsh Government here yesterday highlighting how many unknowns there are, but then contrast that with Professor Jardine. He was saying actually it isn't good enough to claim volatility in the environment isn't enough to give anyone certainty. There's money out there. We need to continue to push the case sector to lay our claim to it.
So constructive challenge to power, and we'll continue to do that as a team and as an organisation in Wales. I don't know about you guys, but I want to go and listen to Ruth Dodsworth and her inspirational story about how she battled against domestic abuse. So we're going to get to that. Don't stop listening. You've got some fantastic speakers coming up now, Paul Everall and Emma Jardine, some really fascinating insights into a lot of areas that you guys are involved in as housing professionals. So thank you for listening. So we've just finished the session on building regulations and when next. I'm joined by one of the speakers at the session, Paul Everall. Paul, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. I'm Paul Everall. I'm the current chair of the National Home Improvement Council. And before that, for 15 years, I was head of the Building Regulations Division in the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. And then between 2005 and 2020, I was Chief Executive of LABC, the body which is the membership body for building control officers in England and Wales.
A big thing about building regulation and building safety is trust, isn't it? So, given what happened at Grenfell, how do we go about rebuilding that confidence? We can have the legislation which may do some of the functions, but how do we actually get people to trust in the system again?
Yeah, well, certainly Grenfell destroyed trust between residents and the owners and managers of buildings. And the legislation in itself will not help greatly there. That is more concerned with ensuring that no buildings like Grenfell Tower are ever built again. So what is needed now for a greater involvement between landlords and residents, and the importance of landlords having the right skills and ethics to talk sensibly to their residents and try and bring back that trust that it is safe for them to continue to live in the properties where they are.
And does the legislation and the narrative from government at both ends of the M4, does it go about addressing that issue, or does more need to be done to sort of bring that public contribution into developing better regulations?
Yes, I think much more does need to be done. Dame Judith Hackett herself, who said that, who proposed changes to the legislation, said that wasn't all that was necessary. There needs a change of culture right through the industry, and that includes those who manage and own houses. And I think it may be something where the Chartered Institute of Housing can help in developing professional standards to ensure that there is proper involvement, engagement, and that trust can be built back.
And a challenge laid down there for us as an organisation, which we'll endeavour to meet. And just finally, I mean, a lot of this is sort of pegged around actually the policing of it. So a lot of regulation about how much money there is in the system to support the policing of regulations. Do you see that as coming through as well?
Well, building regulations, the enforcement of building regulations has never really been properly resourced, and still isn't. And I'm not sure the legislation will particularly change that, at least for buildings which aren't over 18 metres in height. So it does come back to changing the culture, and everybody has a responsibility to self-enforce the jobs they're trying to do. So that's not an easy thing to achieve, but I hope very much it can be achieved.
Okay, and that's the main challenge, isn't it, the culture. Thank you very much, Paul, and that's great. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the journey up to see us. Have a safe trip back to Dorset.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So we're fresh out of an inspirational session with Emma Jardine. I'll just quickly introduce yourself, Emma, and what Streetreads is all about.
We're from Streetreads, and we are an initiative of Simon Community Scotland. Simon Community Scotland is a homelessness charity, and Streetreads gives books out to homeless people.
And you certainly did your homework coming to Wales with that sort of inspirational quote right at the end, which brought a tear to my eye around the Manic Street Preachers approach, around quote around the dignity that goes from people when they're homelessness, and about how this project is reinstating that dignity, that sort of human conscience, that human relationship. Is that what it's all about, the project? That
absolutely is what it's all about. People. Obviously, those people who are homeless are not necessarily all rough sleepers. So, as you know, homelessness includes, those people who are sofa surfing or who are in temporary and unsafe accommodation. But when you speak to people who actually do sleep on the streets, rough sleepers, the thing that they find the hardest to deal with, apart from the physical aspect of the hardships of being homeless, is the way that people look at them, or rather don't look at them at all. So they either look at them with some form of disgust or disapproval, or they completely ignore them because they think they're subhuman. And it's not a nice thing for a lot of people to reflect on some of the problems in our own society, that we have people who don't have a home. People don't really want to engage with that line of thinking, and therefore they just choose to ignore it. And that's the thing that hurts people the most, I think, is that they are not considered to be part of the community.
And being able to, reconnect with our culture. Culture so much binds us as a species, as a community, and that simple act of reading a book and the conversation that it, just sort of tell us, about real-time examples of what impact that's had on your clients, etc.
It gives you something to talk about, and it gives you something to talk about that is not about them or their problems. And it reminds us that they had another life before the life in which you see them now, which can be a life of real hardship, and that they don't want to talk about that all the time. They want to talk about their imagination and their likes and their dislikes, and it gives you this space to talk about all sorts of different things. So, for example, One of our readers used to be in the Navy, and he likes books about other countries. And you would bring him a book about China, just as an example, and he would say, "Oh, well, I haven't been to China, but I went to Singapore, and I did this when I was there, and I met a woman, and we had a great love affair." And you remember that there's human stories behind everything. And the book is just, often the book is just a way to start another conversation. And if you think about a rough sleeper, it is possible that someone hasn't had a proper conversation with another human being for a number of days. And whilst Simon Community Scotland and its outreach workers will be going out to check on people, you're often, the conversation will be about, when did you last eat? Have you taken your prescription? Are you going to be able to go to this appointment? You don't look very well. Not anything to do with, not the lighter side of life, but the more human, personal part of existence.
So this is probably a clumsy way of contextualising it, because it's not about showing results, is it? But it almost sounds like a sort of, not necessarily escapism, but it's a cathartic process to allow them to, distance themselves from their situation. But does that allow them to think more constructively about, maybe how to address the issues that they're facing, or isn't that fundamentally not what this is about? It's about providing that space.
If it does, that's another positive outcome, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is just let someone be themselves, and there will be a point at which the person may want to address some of the issues that underlie their homelessness. But that's not what we're there for. We're just there to provide, in our words, a temporary place of solace for a short period of time. But in that period of time, someone is reconnecting with who they used to be. And that person might be, a more healthy version of themselves. So it is possible that it helps, but that's not necessarily what we set out to do.
But imagine I'm the Welsh Minister for Housing. What do you say to me? Should I spend money rolling it out here? Does it impact that much that it's worth doing?
It works because it's a way to connect people. There are other ways to do it. It won't be the only way. Music is another way that works really well. But we all know what we need to do to solve homelessness. And it's not just giving people houses. And we all know that those people who don't have homes often have other problems that need to be addressed. And we know during the pandemic, we know exactly how we can do it. During the pandemic, just using Edinburgh as an example, we got down to a point where there were less than 5 people sleeping on the streets in the whole of Edinburgh. And we knew exactly where everybody was because we physically lifted people from the streets and put them in a hotel. And because of the pandemic, that was a safe, public health inspired way to do things. But whilst they were in the hotel, we were able to provide all the help that they required because we knew exactly where they were. And therefore, rather than getting them to see a nurse or a chiropodist or a psychiatric practitioner, they were able to, it was the other way around. We knew that John was in room 25. All we had to do was send the nurse to room 25 and give John the support that he required.
Great.
Yeah, I may be oversimplifying, but that's the answer.
Grand. Thank you for joining us. Inspirational stuff, and thanks for making the long journey down to Swansea.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it. That's TAI 2022 completed. We had an incredible couple of days of sessions and networking. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us, whether you were a speaker, delegate or sponsor. It was great to see everyone, and I already can't wait for next year. And to anyone who's feeling inspired to get involved after listening to that, remember,
CIH events are now exclusive and free as part of our membership offer. Simply head to the CIH website to discover more about joining us, along with all of the other incredible benefits on offer. Thank you very much to everyone.